welcome back, everybody. I'm Dan John, and this is the podcast from danjohnuniversity.com. Each and every week, people send in questions, and I answer them as best I can. This is episode 155, and as a reminder, if you have questions, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I'll do my best to answer each and every one. We get a lot of duplicates, a lot of the same questions. I often reference, maybe you ought to Google that. But here we go. Let's begin. Our first question is from James. James is a master runner who runs 5 to 6 days a week, depending on mileage. I've been using kettlebells for about 3 years now for strength. Since running is my main focus, I keep my kettlebell programming simple, but want to make sure my approach isn't counterproductive. Now, he's about to share his workouts, which is great. The only thing he doesn't include is load. And we also don't have his body weight. So there's a classic problem about to happen. And the problem is this: what do you mean by this? So if I say, jeepers, I'm just snatching and clean and jerking 3 days a week, but those numbers are world-class numbers, and it's completely different than saying, I Olympic lift 3 days a week. I use, a PVC pipe or a broomstick and do a couple sets of 5. And not to be a jerk, it's just important. Those little bits of information are important. His workout's pretty simple. He does 10 sets of 10 in the swing, 100 total reps. He does 5 Turkish get-ups left, 5 Turkish get-ups right. Goblet squats, 5 sets of 5. Clean and press, 5 sets of 5 on both sides. Single leg deadlift, 2x5. Lunges, 2x5. He has basically a easy strength kind of concept. He sticks with weights so that they always feel very easy. He says super easy. They then transition to heavier weights. He does kettlebells twice a week. He asks if this is a prudent approach. And well, of course, I have to say I have an extensive track and field background. I was going to track meets, when I was 5 to watch my brothers compete. It might even have been younger. I've been around track and field literally my whole life. I've been to cross-country meets in some really nice places and some really bad places. I've been all around the world at track and field events. Track and field has a love affair with weightlifting, and we've been doing this since the 1940s. I'm very proud that track and field, or athletics or light athletics, have been pioneers in getting strength and conditioning into mainstream athletics. I'm a big believer in this. He asked, should I periodize his kettlebells? One of the things I like when I read Percy Sarity, when I read Maffei Tone, when I read J.K. Doherty, when I read a lot of the great coaches, is one of the things I think we've gotten away from in modern track and field. Well, that's not true. In lots of training is there is no off season anymore. There's no preparatory period. There's no general training. I used to like the old phrases, and I still do. Off season up to 4 weeks, 6 weeks a year, where you don't do anything. You take it off. And then there's that massive general training, or the off season, we used to call it. And then a pre-season, then in season. And you have clear, separate lines. So the answer to you, or to anybody who asks this question, is yes. I think it's always a good idea to have some kind of thing where you change with the seasons. Now, you're going to have to figure that out with what you consider your in season. So if you're doing a lot of events in the summer, spring, fall, there's 3 seasons, you're going to have to rethink. I think you have to rethink how you approach that. I have found with my athletes, because I'm in the American collegiate system with a lot of my athletes, when it's the perfect time of year to throw the discus shot, hammer, and javelin, of course, is the summer. And we very often in some states there's no track meets at all. So we have made the summer probably the most intensive time of mixing the Olympic lifts with throwing, because I know that we have, this is going to sound odd, but we have fall and winter to sort of recover after this heavy spring and summer. And it's just a different way of doing things. So yes, at some level, you should periodize your kettlebells. I would focus more in the farther away from your competitions, the more kettlebells you should do. He's come across some strength programs for runners that recommend periodizing strength, but it seems like overcomplicating things. Yeah, there's a couple things I'd like you to think about in general. First, I do have a program on Dan John University called Kettlebell Easy Strength, and it already sounds like you're doing it. I think you're doing, you do lunges and you're doing the single side deadlifts. That's probably redundant. Having said that, if that's stuff you like to do and you think it's important, I'm not going to argue against you. The other thing I would recommend is the workout generator for what you're doing. If you plug in the equipment you have, and it seems like maybe just kettlebells or whatever, you might need just a little bit more variety in your movements. Variation comes to us in 3 styles, wild, mild, and no. Right now, it just looks like you have no variation. And by the way, that's fine. And mild variation would be going, from incline bench to, bench press to decline bench to military. Wild variation would be you train for a kettlebell certification, then you train for an Olympic lifting meet. That's what I do actually. So one of the things I'd recommend is that you're going to need mild variation. And I think the workout generator will help you a lot. Okay, so basically we have a question from James. He's using kettlebells for running. And 2 big questions showed up. First, should he periodize his training? I think yes. There should be a time of year we do more kettlebells and a different kind of running program. There should be a time of year we do less kettlebells and more intensity. And then the other thing he asked about is, what about variation? And I think the workout generator is the best idea for someone who's running and doing kettlebells, because what you need in the kettlebell work is some mild variation, some small changes in your training, not massive, but small. I hope that helped. Thank you. We have a question from David. David says, I am looking to hear your thoughts on training the Olympic lifts with no contact. Now, I had to read this several times. I think he means brushing the bar on the thighs as you pull. For the record, I'm a male, 6 foot, 110K, 242, have no intentions of competing, but I'm using these movements to build strength for rugby season, and it's definitely working so far. I'm trying to build up my body weight clean and press and body weight clean grip snatch. A body weight clean grip snatch will be an impressive lift. 110 kilo clean grip snatches, and your shoulders will be healthy. I am only a few kilograms short of my goals, which is outstanding. Is there any issues with doing no contact during these movements? I feel no discomfort or pain, but find very little information on it online. In fact, the no contact makes me feel more powerful and more explosive. Well, before I competed, it wasn't long before, I would say within a decade, it was illegal to actually touch your skin on the way up in the Olympic lifts. I've talked to a lot of my old friends, and they used to get ready for weightlifting meets with standard bars, so non-rotating bars, and they would lift with no contact. So basically, you couldn't bring your hips in, you couldn't drive it, you couldn't bounce it off your thighs. If you watch really the elite Olympic lifters, you'll notice that they don't really bounce the bar off their thighs or hip area like you'll see some people teach. It seems to me that their body is coming underneath the bar so aggressively and explosively. Yeah, there's contact, but it's not like, they're not bouncing it off. There is a contact, but it's not. It's just because that's the biomechanics in the bar meeting. Is there value in no contact Olympic lifting? Yeah, I mean, I just know that the people I grew up with, the people who are like 15 years older than I am, and not all of them are still alive, uh, they had that weird strength. We sometimes will call it dad strength. You know, I remember my dad couldn't lift weights, but he could, he could pick an engine out of a car. You know, that crazy dad strength that we used to joke about all the time. I think it builds that kind of strength. And, since you're doing rugby, your primary thing is rugby. I mean, if you can play the game at the highest level and you're terrible in the weight room, I'd still put you in. So if you find there's value in it, I recommend it 100%. So really the question is pretty simple. Do you need to have contact with the barbell for sports? And my answer would be, pardon me, anytime you lift weights, that's good. If you don't look like a power lifter with all the wraps and straps and everything when you do squats, that's fine. If you use the Olympic lifts for your sport and you don't look like the world champion, I'm fine with that too. I will tell you this, not a lot of world champion Olympic lifters could play a full game of rugby. So yes, I think it's a good idea, and good luck to you, okay? Good question, thank you. We have a question from Enrique. A few weeks ago, I found out that Saxon lifted 168 kilograms, 371 pounds in the bench press. The biggest overhead presses are around 200K. My question is, how is this possible with one hand? Is there a biomechanical trick here or just magic? Well, I teach the bench press, and I'll be honest, I see no value in it. 2 quick points, and this isn't to pour any acid on anyone, but the issue with strongmen has always been they did shows. And when I found out that, like, for example, Bob Hoffman used to travel around with aluminum plates and, do these massive attempts of the bench press, but the bars were, clearly light. I guess Joe Weider had an aluminum weightlifting set. I remember a picture of Tom Platz, and he was clean and pressing clearly in the mid 400s. And then I found out later on that the plates were fake. If that's true, it's true. If it's not, I apologize to Tom. I do. I've been around some other people who they fake lifts. I'll put my hands in the bar. 2 other people help me pick the weight up, and we hold the weight like this, and it says, I just power clean, 495 or something like that. I have never believed in strongman numbers. I hear all kinds of things about this strongman did this strongman did that. And I'm not ripping on strongman, but it is a professional show. So they're putting on a show. I need to say that because very often people get stuck and I know at the Stark Center, there's a big discussion about officially recognizing the person who actually should own the world record in an event. Very often people say they did this or they did that, and the numbers, it's interesting over time, and Jan Todd told me this, is that the numbers get higher. So I made this lift, and then later then there's a few more pounds, and then there's a lot more pounds, and then there's, it's a show. The bench press, of course, isn't a press. It is you basically leverage yourself away from the bar. The bar is stationary. You move away from the bar, which is probably the hardest part of teaching the bench press at the certs. How he did it, I don't know. Was Saxon an amazing specimen? Certainly, no question about it. Is he more amazing than the athletes that we see at the Olympics and at the World Championships now? I don't think so. It's an interesting question to ask me. You're asking someone who you're asking me a question about a lift. I kind of sort of roll my eyes at. That happened well over 100 years ago. Is it possible? Well, I'm sure everything's possible. Do I believe it? Well, I will sleep fine whether I believe it or not tonight. So Enrique, generally I summarize a question at the end, but on this one, I'll just say, I have great respect for Saxon. I have great respect from Hackenschmidt and all those, all the people. But sometimes they were trying to sell tickets. So there you go. We have a question from Rafif. For the past couple of weeks, I've been doing your one lift a day program plus your hanging program. After 2 months, I can finally do a chin-up. Well, good for you. An exercise I never thought I could do. My next goal is to increase my number of chin-ups while also aiming for 100 kettlebell snatches in 5 minutes. What do you think of doing an easy strength approach in both these exercises? Or do you have any other suggestions? Well, if you're going to do I already have a built-in program for that, Rafif. You're just going to go to Dan John University and just do the RKC prep program. That's exactly what it's designed for. You'll do clean and press and pull-up chin-ups 3 days a week, and 1 day a week. You'll do lots and lots of kettlebell snatches, and the other day of the week has some variation, some variety to it. There's no need for me to reinvent the wheel. Go to Dan John University, look at the RKC prep program. Many people have done it before you. And the interesting thing about this is by the time you get finished, there's a chance you might be doing chin-ups with additional load, because that 3 day week rite of passage program done correctly helped my chin-up more than anything else. I did the rite of passage for my cert. I only had a 28, so a Kettlebell. So I did the snatch test with a 28 in training. One day that got easy, so I did the snatch test, and Pavel at the time was telling us we should try it with an oven mitt. So I did the snatch test with an oven mitt with the 28 kilo bell, and when I did it there, I was pretty convinced I would pass the test easily, and I did. So Rafif, you're asking, you've been doing the one lift a day program plus chin-ups, and it worked well. And now you're going to slide down to easy strength and the kettlebell to train for the kettlebell snatch. My argument is you're doing a lot of different things. Just do the simple program of the RKC prep program on the site, Dan John University. I think that's just your best answer. Okay, I do. Sometimes when you mix and match too many programs at once, things fall apart. But the problem is you can never figure out what fell apart. Good question, and thank you. We have a question from David. David says this: I have been doing double kettlebell presses for the past few months, and I have no problem double clean and pressing the 24 kilo bells for a few reps. However, I recently tried out single arm kettlebell presses with the 20 kilo bell, and this caused problems and pain in my shoulder on both sides. That's really interesting. It seems like the single arm press is significantly more difficult than the double press for me. I'm wondering if you can please explain this, why this might be, and how to proceed from here. Well, I can't completely explain it, except all I can say is this. When you're lifting double bells, the bells become part of your support structure. So we discovered this with single arm, double kettlebell front squats versus single side kettlebell front squats, is that sometimes when someone will do these and squat perfectly, and then when we go to just single side, they start to squat and turn. It's almost like they're getting ready to throw it. Well, the reason is, I think, is because when you have double weights, you balance. So when you went to a single, and this is just a thought, David, I'm not watching, I'm not seeing your technique, is when you slide to a single, is when you go to press, you might start to squirm and roll and put your shoulder in a situation because of the lack of support on this side. So simple experiment I want you to try first. Double kettlebells, one arm press. So you have two kettlebells, but you press with one side, David. That's the first thing I want you to try. If you find that pressing with 2 kettlebells. This one's just going to stay in the rack, and this one's going to actively press. Put the bell down, rest, try the other side. If you find that that exercise doesn't cause any pain, issues with your shoulder, then I think it's a question of your stability. I was going to say core, but holding your chin, sternum, and zipper on a straight line, using your anaconda strength, your squeeze strength to hold everything together, squeezing your glutes, your quads, grabbing the ground with your feet. You might not be doing that, and that is just making, so if you're loose as you press, maybe that's causing some kind of shoulder issue. So double kettlebell press, one arm press. Try that, maybe even do a couple workouts with that. Then go back to the single and see if you've learned anything about structure. If it is lack of core engagement, I think the simplest thing for you to do is suitcase carries. It's a one-arm farmer walk. Get some extra suitcase carries in. Might not even be a bad idea. Do a set of that exercise, double clean, single arm press. Next exercise, suitcase carry, left arm down, right arm back. Do the press again, left arm down, right arm back, and just see if we can build through that system. So David has a small issue. His shoulders hurt when he does single arm presses, but not when he does double arm presses. My thought, it's a very simple thought, is do a quick experiment, clean 2 kettlebells and press with 1. If that doesn't hurt the shoulder, you're doing single arm presses, but with an additional bell here. If that doesn't hurt, then it's a stability issue, a support issue, and add suitcase carries and do this double kettlebell but single arm press exercise followed by suitcase carries, and let's just see if we can get ahead of that. If that doesn't help, I strongly recommend going to a physical therapist or someone who knows shoulders well. Thank you. We have a question from Ford. I recently got back into exercise after an extended hiatus from strength training. I'm 5'11", 230, and 29 years old. I'm a former university rugby player, stocky frame, and have gained quite a bit of more weight than I would like over the past few years of not playing sport or exercising. I stopped playing rugby due to numerous injuries, which I've now resolved: separated shoulders, torn hamstrings, and 3 herniated discs in my neck. Yeah, those are separated shoulders, torn hamstrings, and herniated discs in the neck. I can't wait to find out what you're doing next, because I know what you're going to do. I've started reading your works online and have recently discovered your podcast, and it's inspired me to get back into strength training. And here we go. I am currently practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 3 days a week because, with separated shoulders, torn hamstrings, and 3 herniated discs in your neck, rolling around a mat with someone trying to rip your limbs off probably is going to work well. And I'm looking to reintegrate a strength training program. I would like to be able to lift 3 to 5 days a week, but I'm worried I may be chasing too many rabbits with the jiu-jitsu and strength training. Would something like Easy Strength be a good starting place for me? Well, yeah, Easy Strength is always a good option for weightlifting, but I'm going to tell you, after reading this, I think you need a much more generalized template for a while. I want you to go to Dan John University. I want you to plug in your equipment. I want you to do the workout generator. And I'll tell you why. You need to push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry. You need to do mobility work. You need to do flexibility work. You need to rebuild your base. As much as I like Easy Strength, it seems to me that you also need to do some serious mobility work. 3 herniated discs in the neck. I worry long term. You're 29. I worry long term about your health, because once you hurt discs and once you tear things in your body, they clean up, they get better, but they're always, my usual joke is, I've got one more injury in me. I don't have one more recovery in me. the recovery is the issue after a while. So generally, just to summarize really quickly, we have a former rugby player with a lot of injuries, quit training, he's stocky, feels out of shape, he's doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 3 days a week, which I'm not sure is the best idea with neck injuries, a history of neck injuries, but if you like it, you like it. And I'm recommending him just basically get on the workout generator, give yourself a couple of months of good old-fashioned push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry, mobility work, flexibility work, some reasonable cardiovascular options, and let the body rebuild. And it's a very interesting cliche. Get back on your feet a little bit. Sometimes when you're coming in, you need to use patience when you're overcoming injuries and moving forward. Sometimes it takes a couple of years to turn things back around. In my case, after my long career, I wish I would have taken a little more time to go from high level to back into normal training. I rushed things a little bit with some various challenges, and I don't regret it, but long term, sometimes it's better to have, we have that great cliche in our field. The best training program for you is 3 by 52, 3 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So when in doubt, 3 by 52. Well, we have a question from Ed, and it's interesting because there's no real question here, but I like what he said. Around 2 years ago, I completed the 10,000 swing challenge with the 45-pound bell. Didn't realize I should have had a higher weight. The thing that stuck with me is the reduction in my resting heart rate. Same thing I find. My resting heart rate at the doctor's at my last checkup was 58, and I was very pleased with that. Prior to the challenge, I was struggling with my resting heart rate being in the 90s and then peaking well over 100 after lunchtime. Wow, it's pretty high. This would make me feel sweaty and anxious. After completing the challenge, my resting heart rate dropped to the 60s, with no more post-lunch spikes. Since doing the challenge, I do 3 sets of 25 swings 3 days a week with the 53-pound bell, the 24, lift 3 days per and walk. But my resting heart rate is still at that 60 to 70 range without the spikes. I don't know that I would have been able to make that big of a step change in my resting heart rate without doing the challenge. I'm just surprised that that bit has stuck. Wow, Ed, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, that is kind of inspiring in a way. All I want to say is that, Ed, this reminds me of what the late, great Dr. Leonard Schwartz taught us with what he called pan aerobics, but actually you would know it by its more famous name, heavy hands. What he discovered by using all of his limbs on walking. So he put light weights in his hand and he walked like this, very much like a cross-country skier, is that his resting heart rate, I think he was 38, which is just, I mean, that's like what, thump. I mean, that's just amazing. I think the 10,000 swing challenge, one of the things it does do is train the body similar to what you're getting in pan aerobics. You're getting a full body movement, and of course we all know that, but in your case you saw it happening in real time, and it stayed. I would obviously having your heart rate get over 100 after lunch is a concern. It's good to see it come back down. I do hope you do go get an annual physical. And this would be the kind of thing with my Dr. Brunetti. I would sit down and I would tell him, I would say, here's what I've done, here's what's changed. And that gives him a better glimpse. Something I want you to think about, and this is important, and you listeners really need to hear this thing. So when I work with somebody who, in this case, has a 60 heart rate, I think 60 is great. Okay, so this might not be perfect, but when I hear he's at 60, but he was at 90 to 100, So I always look at rolling averages. So be sure you start, when you think about what he said to us today, that he was at 90 and now he's at 60. Anybody who drops 50% in their heart rate beats per minute, he's doing something right. And the fact that he has kept it with this minimal, compared to the 10,000 swing challenge, a much more minimal number is something I look at. Why do I bring this up? So if I'm working with a client and the client shows up and they weigh 300 pounds, and you say, well, Edna needs to do this, this, and this, I'll stop you right there and I'll say, Edna did weigh 350, and going from 350 to 300, she did that by drinking more water and going for daily walks. Don't give her this massive advice, this top end, prep contest, photo shoot, movie role thing. She's doing fine. Her rolling average, her average is doing this, so she's fine. Now, when someone tells me that their heart rate is, like, for example, it would have been a little bit easier. The example would be if you've gotten your heart rate down to 80. Because if someone said to me, well, your heart rate's at 80, I'd go, okay, it's probably a little resting heart rate. It was 100 and I brought it to 100. I'll stop judging 80 as being high and start nodding my head going, okay, your rolling average is good. We are trending in the right direction. And folks, I think we're always trending. Now, there's going to be minor fluctuations, obviously, but we're always trending in a direction. So for me, I like to sit back when I do these kind of conversations and look at where the trends are. And when I start looking at trends, honestly, I think I say a lot less stupid stuff. So great question. Very quickly, we have a question from someone who had a very, very high heart rate, did the 10,000 swing challenge with a bit lighter bell, which is just fine, and got their high heart rate down to a steady 60, and it's remained there over time. My thought is this takes us back to Leonard Schwartz with Panaerobics, heavy hands. And just remember, to help your heart, I think it does help as best you can to do full body movements as appropriate. Now, we know that walking is the most efficient way to oxidize fat, burn fat. But when you're talking about bringing the heart rate down, it does seem to help to add extra limbs. One of my neighbors, he's an older gentleman, and he uses ski poles when he walks. And he told me originally he used ski poles because of he has a issue, and he used the ski poles for balance. But then he realized when his balance improved, and this is a great little story, but what he notices that is he wasn't getting the cardiovascular impact when he got rid of the poles, when his balance got better. So now he uses the poles to actually make his workouts harder. The poles aren't very heavy, but it's that little extra push he gets from every stride. Anytime your heart rate is going down from 90 to 60, it's a good thing. I think this is our last question here. Eli asks this: I was wondering what breathing technique, if any, you prefer for hill sprints. Yeah, mine is your mileage may vary. I notice that I tend to hold my breath and let it out in tiny bursts in each step. Oh, like you're doing a sled, okay, or a prowler, okay. Almost like the breathing pattern you have when lifting heavy weight. This is what I just do naturally, but it makes sense to me because you're trying to put maximum force into the ground with each rep and therefore need a lot of tension in the body. What do you think? Boy, I've been doing hill sprints my whole life, and I don't think I've ever thought about breathing because, when we did the one that was at the end of El Cortez, the hill that was at the end of El Cortez, growing up, it was a steep hill, but it was so fast, it was never a big deal. Utah State, the air was so thin, we just did what we could. At Judge, the hill was steep, and we'd only do 2 or 3 of those, and we just try to get the damn things done. So I would say, I think you're doing fine. I think, Eli, a lot of it depends on the length of the hill. I've done short, tough hills. I've done long, tough hills. Those ones at Denison University in Granville, that hill is a bear. It's the longest training hill I've ever done. And it just keeps curving. It just keeps going higher. So on that one, I don't think you could breathe like that. But I like your idea if they're short bursts. One thing that'd be interesting for you to do, Eli, is measure time, how long it takes you to do your hill. I'm guessing you're probably in the 10 to 15 second range, which is just fine. And maybe that's what it is. So Eli asked a question about breathing on hill sprints. I'm a big fan of breathing on hill sprints. And I think a lot of it depends on the steepness of the hill and the length of the hill. But I definitely think you're going to learn a lot about your thighs, your legs when you do hill sprints. And also if you do enough of them that are long enough, you learn a lot about your heart, lungs, and your general cardiovascular conditioning. Well, there you go. That's podcast 155. It was, as always, an honor to talk with you. Remember, if you have questions, you're going to email them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com, and I'll do my best to answer each and every one. And until next time, let's all keep on learning and lifting. Thank you.